The Power of Strategic Silence, based on Machiavelli's ideas. What if I told you there is a single idea from one of history's most infamous and controversial books that could change your life? Let me explain. I've talked about this idea with my friends Tim Ferriss and Neil Strauss, and both agreed it's the most valuable thing they've ever learned. That's why in this video, I want to share it with you because I think it could be life-changing for you too. This idea comes to us from Niccolò Machiavelli, better known as Machiavelli, who wrote The Prince in 1532. The book is considered the foundational text of political science and the blueprint for modern geopolitics. It's been translated into every major living language and has sold millions of copies over the centuries. But Machiavelli wasn't just some academic writing a dry textbook. He was a true Renaissance man, an author who understood the power of storytelling and how stories can change hearts and minds. That's why The Prince is written in the form of a letter from an unknown author to an unknown prince in a fictional Italian kingdom. And it's one of the reasons I'm drawn to this work of historical fiction and its enduring legacy. But this book isn't for the faint of heart. In fact, it's been called the Bible of dictators and has been banned in several countries. So what makes this book so controversial? Well, one of the central arguments of the book is that the ends justify the means, which sounds great. If the goal is to help people, then any means necessary to get there should be on the table. But the problem arises when you start defining what are ends and what are means. Are you willing to sacrifice a few innocent lives to save the many? Are you willing to betray a friend to save your own skin? Are you willing to lie, cheat, or steal if it gets you closer to your goals? These are the sorts of questions that kept me up at night as I read this book, forcing me to confront the darkness within myself, the things I would never admit to myself, let alone say out loud. Because the truth is we all have a little bit of Machiavellianism inside us. We all have the capacity for great good and great evil, depending on our goals and values. So in this video, I want to cover 3 of the most shocking lessons from this book and why they still matter today. Lesson No. 1 is the power of strategic silence. To truly understand the power of strategic silence, we first have to understand the power of language. In fact, in ancient Greece, the word rhetoric was synonymous with power. It was believed that whoever could use words most effectively had the ability to influence others and persuade them to see the world through their eyes. But unlike his predecessors, Machiavelli saw the danger of unchecked rhetoric. In chapter 6 of The Prince, he writes, "It is much safer to be feared than to be loved." If you can't be both, fear is something you can control. Love is something you can't control. Why does this matter? Because everything you say can and will be used against you. You have no control over how others perceive or interpret your words. Once you utter them into the ether, they're gone. You can't take them back. In fact, the more you try to clarify or walk back your statements, the deeper the hole you dig yourself into. In business, this is a common pitfall. I've seen founders say stupid things on Twitter or in interviews and immediately regret it. They spend hours trying to clean up the mess. They issue long statements trying to clarify their thoughts, but it's too late. The damage is done. The smart entrepreneur understands the power of strategic silence. They don't feel compelled to respond to every comment or criticism. They take time before making a statement, especially if they're emotional or controversial, and if they do make a mistake, they correct it quickly, apologize sincerely, and then move on. Silence can be uncomfortable, but strategic silence is powerful. As someone once said, when you shut up, other people will think you're dead, so don't be afraid of silence. Embrace it. Use it to your advantage, and remember, sometimes the best response is no response. Lesson No. 2 is the art of deception. When I shared this idea with Tim Ferriss, he told me it changed his life. It forced him to confront some of his deepest beliefs and assumptions about right and wrong. In chapter 18 of The Prince, Machiavelli famously writes, "It is much safer to be feared than to be loved. If you can't be both." Why? Because according to Machiavelli, love is uncontrollable. You can't force people to love you. You can't buy people's love. And if you fake it, they'll eventually find out and the relationship will end badly. But fear, on the other hand, is something entirely different. Fear is based on respect and understanding. If people respect you and understand your capabilities, then they'll be afraid of you. And this fear is something you can control. According to Machiavelli, fear is a powerful motivator. It can inspire great effort and commitment. People will go to extraordinary lengths to avoid frightening you. And this fear can be a powerful force for good if you use it wisely. Now, you might be asking, how do you use fear wisely? Well, that's where the art of deception comes in. In chapter 24, Machiavelli writes, "It is much easier to be a man feared than a man loved." This is not only because the object of fear inspires more respect, but because if you wish to be both feared and loved, there is nothing easier than to act in such a way as to avoid being hated, since hatred is always shown more clearly than love. Now, this doesn't mean you should intentionally set out to deceive or harm others. Instead, it means you should always be aware of how your actions and words can be perceived by others, and you should be willing to adjust your behavior accordingly. For example, if you're leading a team at work and you want to inspire fear, you might need to adopt a more authoritative demeanor. You might need to make tough decisions and stick to them even if others don't agree with you. Or you might need to speak up and take credit for your team's accomplishments. On the other hand, if you're trying to build relationships and trust with others, then you might need to be more empathetic and compassionate. You might need to show genuine interest in others and their opinions, even if you don't agree with them. This might mean letting go of your ego and being vulnerable with others. And that's exactly what Tim Ferriss did when he read this book. He realized that in order to achieve his goals, he needed to be more feared than loved. He needed to be willing to make tough decisions and take risks. He needed to be willing to be hated for doing what's right, and in the process, he became a stronger, more effective leader. And lesson 3 is the importance of knowing your enemy. Imagine going into battle without knowing your enemy's strengths and weaknesses. You'd be fighting blind. Chances are you wouldn't last long. Well, that's exactly what happens when we approach life without fully understanding our enemies. In chapter 7 of The Prince, Machiavelli writes, "Whoever is good at the start will stay good. Whoever is bad at the start will stay bad." It's easy to know the nature of a man by the way he behaves in a foreign country. Why? Because when you're in familiar surroundings, you feel safe and comfortable. You can rely on your past experiences and the support of those around you. It's easy to stay true to your values and beliefs. But when you're in a foreign country, all bets are off. You're cut off from your support system. You don't know the customs or the laws. You don't speak the language. You have to rely on your instincts and make your own decisions. It's a whole new world where you're on your own. According to Machiavelli, the key to success in a foreign country is to be adaptable and flexible. You need to be able to learn the rules and customs quickly and make new alliances with people who share your values. You need to be willing to compromise and adapt to new situations. Otherwise, you'll be left behind. And that's why it's so important to know your enemy. You need to understand their values and beliefs, their goals and motivations. Only then can you hope to win them over or defeat them. That's why I always encourage people to travel, to experience new cultures and meet new people. It's the ultimate test of character. It forces you to confront your own biases and assumptions and to learn from those who are different from you. And it's amazing what you can learn about yourself and others in the process. The first time I traveled abroad, I was just 19 years old. I was backpacking through Europe with nothing but a backpack and a student visa. I didn't know anyone when I arrived, but I was eager to meet new people and learn about their culture. One day, I met a group of German students and we became fast friends. They took me to see the local sites and introduced me to their favorite foods. I learned about their history and traditions, and they learned about mine. It was a great experience. But as the weeks went by, I noticed something. They didn't seem to like the Americans very much. They complained about our foreign policy and our cultural influence, and I couldn't help but wonder why. Were they just being mean, or was there something more to it? Then one day, one of my friends let slip an opinion he'd been holding onto. He said, "You Americans are too individualistic. You don't think about the community or the environment. You're selfish and greedy." And I was shocked. I had never thought of myself as selfish or greedy. I was raised to believe that America was the greatest country in the world. But here was someone who had a different perspective, and I didn't want to hear it. I tried to argue with him, but he wouldn't budge. And that's when I realized the power of knowing your enemy. My friend wasn't just being mean. He had legitimate concerns about America's role in the world. And if I wanted to understand his perspective, I needed to listen and learn. And in the process, I became a better traveler, a better listener, and a better friend. These are just 3 of the many shocking lessons from The Prince. And I highly encourage you to read the book for yourself to see what other insights you can find. Just be warned, you'll never look at the world the same way again. If you want to continue questioning things, check out the other videos on the channel.